Hello, everybody. This is John Marcotte, and we are doing the Heroic Girls Book Club. I hope that we have some people here because we're talking about a good one today. We are talking about my favorite, Red Sonya, the Queen of Plagues. I was not always a Red Sonya fan, but I have become one because of this book. And joining me today is one of our board members, Sarah. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing really well, although I had the volume turned up too high and you just about shattered my eardrums, but that's okay. I still I still admire you for that. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about Red Sonya. It is one of my favorite books out of the past few years. And I think the reason I like it so much is because I so studiously have avoided Red Sonya. I mean, the character's been around since 2 years after I was born. That's how old Red Sonya is, from 1973. And in the intervening time, I've seen Red Sonya multiple times on the cover of books and things. And I went, especially how she was drawn before, overly buxom woman, chainmail bikini. It's obviously just exploitative as hell, and I'm not going to touch it. I didn't for a very, very long time. But Dynamite Comics got the rights to Red Sonya a little while ago, and they had a run with her initially, and I still ignored the book successfully. And then they said, we're going to reboot the character, and they put Gail Simone in charge of it. Gail Simone's one of my favorite writers. And I said, okay, I don't like Red Sonya, but I do like Gail Simone. So I'm going to give Red Sonya a try. And I was so pleasantly happy that I did. So what was your initial impression of the book when you saw it? I know you don't have the years and years of nerdiness that I do behind you, but what did you think of Red Sonya? Because this is probably your first time with the character, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, I've got my own nerd situation going on, but that's just a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is my first foray with Red Sonya. But I'm familiar with Gail Simone and some of her work, and I'm looking at the comments right now, and I see Diana saying it's bikini chainmail time, and I feel like that's probably what a lot of people thought that when they first saw the cover.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it, and I'm very familiar with a lot of other comic books and some anime. So seeing that portrayed is not it wasn't quite of a shock to me.
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of person, but as far as that goes, reading through the story, I mean, she's a total boss.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to again see another like really strong female driven comic book here. So
right.
that for me was really cool.
Yeah, I'll do a little bit of nerd-splaining here. I'm going to call it nerd-splaining. Red Sonya was a character that was actually created by Marvel Comics as a side character in Conan. Conan the Barbarian, because Marvel had the rights to Conan, and they wanted, at some point you run out of the original story, so you have to make up your own stuff. She's a combination of a couple characters that Robert Howard, the guy who wrote Conan, did create. He created a character called Red Sonya, spelled with a Y, and there's another character, Dark Agnes. And both of them, though, were set in like the Renaissance times. They had pistols and swords. It was not the same thing at all, but they borrowed her red hair and the attitude basically from those characters. And they created this new character, a female counterpart to Conan. Mm-hmm. So she's her own beast, and she was very heavily associated with Conan for a long time. And then at some point, she kind of drifted off, and it's been a while since we've seen her and Conan in the same book, and she became her own creature. My favorite bit of lore about her was that in the olden days of the book, the situation was that if Sonya was traveling the land, and if any man could beat her in combat, she would sleep with them. That was the empowering message that the male comic book writers of the day had come up with. She was just wandering around looking to be conquered, and darn it, nobody could do it. So I think she was really created in an exploitative fashion. I think that's where she started. There's just no denying that. She was this, red-haired, buxom goddess that was just begging for you to conquer her, soldier. That was basically what Sonya was. But she, evolved as a character. It changed with the times. I can't say there's a pretty big gaps in my Sonya knowledge because I just decided not to read her, and so I haven't read a lot of her. But I'm going to talk about what Gail Simone did with her today because I thought that was so good. So, I think actually, I'm looking at my notes. We have to start by talking about the chainmail bikini. I think that's we just got to let's just tackle it. Get it out of the way. I think everybody wants to talk about the chainmail. Oh, there's the chainmail bikini in all its glory. And to be fair, that is actually scale mail because I'm a nerd and I recognize the difference. But it was off-putting to me, extraordinarily so. I mean, enough to like make me not read the character for decades. And then I read this take on the character and everything, and by the end of it, I went, I kind of like it, and I'm a guy, and I know I have it's dangerous for me to say that, but I just felt like she owned it. She was a badass. So what do you? I mean, you have a more balanced perspective probably on that. I'm sure it pinches, and we'll just get that out of the way. But
that was my first thing. I'm like, does it chafe? Is it easier to move in? Like, does she have more like range of motion while she's like slaying all these like terrible people?
That's always
is she going through a phase like with this thing. Like, is she being rebellious? I don't know. But I know. Just looking at it initially, and I was trying to look up a little bit to see like how maybe her just her appearance had evolved over the years. Right. And I found an earlier illustration. It was from the 1970s, and it was tiny waist, tiny hips, and a huge chest with this like very skimpy bikini on. And I appreciate the illustration that is done here because it's a little bit more like, she's like in great shape. She's got great legs, so she can like show it off in a bikini. So, if you feel confident what you're wearing, like I really like this dress, so I wear it a lot. So maybe she really likes the way she looks in her bikini, and so she wears it a lot. But then again, I think, it's empowering versus demeaning. And I think a lot of that, maybe it has to do with maybe personally, I'm even a more like modest conservative person, and I didn't really have a problem with it. But I see the way her actual body is illustrated, and it just looks like a very strong woman. And that I appreciate. And she's also, like I said, she's a boss and she can kick butt. So she has sensible footwear. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
So we have a comment from Diana Lee. She feels that she can only manage the chainmail bikini because she's got a loincloth underneath. Otherwise, riding horses would be impossible. I think that's probably accurate. And she does look like she's got some muscles on her, especially her arms at different points. You can tell that she swings a sword. But David, I should point out that we're trying something new today. We have a producer. We have producer Patty, who you can't see, but she's over this direction right there. Yeah. And she is the one that's keeping track of the comments and putting them up here for us and switching screens in and out to try to make that a little more fluid than watching me scramble for things in the middle of this. I did want to bring out, you brought up it gives her greater range of motion. I'm just going to point out that is what every guy who wants to see a woman wearing virtually nothing is brought up for every female superhero. Batman never seems to need their boy shorts to be able to have his range of motion, but the female villain or superheroes always do. And I will also say that, she's in kind of an adjunct to Conan, and that whole sword and sandals, the whole barbarian thing, they were kind of known for not wearing much. That was Conan's only running around in a loincloth himself. He doesn't, have a shirt. So I do think she kind of matches the aesthetic they were going with. Admittedly, chainmail or scale mail or whatever you want to call it, bikinis are just ridiculous, but she, it is. And I do feel like she just kind of owns it. I can't imagine. I can't imagine. Her character is developed well enough that I buy the idea that she wants to do this and screw you if you don't like.
It's her choice.
It's her choice.
This is what I've decided to wear today.
And which admittedly has been used by the exploitative people to say, oh, this is just what the character wants. But in this case, the character is done well enough that I believe that. I buy it. And a lot of times I wouldn't. So
definitely. I agree.
Here, Patty, could you grab that last comment? Yeah, that's an important determining factor. That is not always true of comic books. It's a little better today. The 90s were really bad for this. You would have women and they were athletic too, which was very impressive since they didn't seem to have a lot of support foundational garments on. Lots of flips and stuff. So So yeah, Sonya, I buy the chainmail bikini. When I was trying to like plug this talk earlier in the week, I threw up a picture from in the comic where she's on her horse and all waving her sword in the air, and then immediately people just pounced on that bikini, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I completely know what you're saying because I was there too. I really was. But read the book. Just read the book, and then you might change your opinion on that particular clothing choice.
Yeah.
So all right. So I guess we spent some time on that. Let's we should talk about this. It is the story itself is the Queen of Plagues, and it tells two stories that are separate and then interweave, and that is kind of we're rewriting Sonya's origin story. So we get two major events in her life that made her Red Sonja, and at the same time, she is paying a kind of a blood debt to this king. That's the only king she ever respected. They point that out. And she is going there to help defend his country, and his whole army has died of the plague, and she is there to help him whip the women and farmers that are left into shape to try to be a defensive force against an invading army, which is just a hopeless task. But Sonya is going to do her best, and she'll die trying, basically. So so that's a whole, that's the basic plot, and there are so many great twists and turns in here. I identified 3 different villains that I liked, but they're big villains, and then there's a few minor ones. We had King Basrat, and he shows up a couple times in the book, but he when Sonya was maybe a teenager, he was a slave king, and he would capture people and make them fight in his gladiator pits. And so he had captured Sonya, and we actually opened the book seeing him. There he is watching Sonya, and that's Anesia there in happier times. These 2 girls were the only women in the slave pits, and or at least the only ones that lived. And they ended up out of 80 people that were forced to fight in hand-to-hand combat to the death. Those were the 2 that lived. And Sonya, at this point, we had seen was fairly handy with a bow, but Anesia there taught her how to handle a sword. So we get an explanation as to why Sonya is such a ferocious sword fighter, is that she had to fight for her life every day for months, years. We're not sure exactly how long she was in that pit. I would say somewhere under a year, but months at the very least. Yeah. And had this like trial by fire training of learning how to wield the sword. And so this was a setup. Basrat here is the part of her origin story, and then she was freed. She and Anesia were the only 2 left in there. They had killed all the other people, and Basrat was cartoonishly evil. I agree. But the good King Tiath comes and rescues them, and his generals are advising them that Anesia and Sonya are not even human anymore because they've been treated so badly and everything. He says, just let's put them out of their misery. And instead, Tiath gives them horses, cleans them up and everything, and gives them a little bit of money on their way. And that is the debt that Sonya owes to him, that he collects on, in the present when he asks her to come help defend his kingdom from this invading army. Right. So what did you think of Sonya's time in the pits here? Did that strike true to you in any way, or?
I think for women everywhere, John, I gotta tell you, no. I mean, there's definitely. I mean, it was so much. There's so much of it in there that's just so gross. with the creepy gremlin who's in there, and like looking at these women as they're just nothing. It's just a sex object, and then they do get into those pits, and it's amazing, like how they slaughter everybody, but they manage to show their worth. But the dungeon, it's just like how demeaning that is, and just that they're stuck in there with this like really creepy guy who he's just gross anyway.
he was a fish man. He was actually not human. Those were part of the bad guys in there. There were fish people, and he was one of those. I will point out though that Sonya was told repeatedly that she did not have a name anymore because she was just a slave, and she refused, and she kept repeating that she was Red Sonja. She kind of held on to that like a mantra. And So, anyways, that was one part of her origin was King
Mhm.
Basrat, who shows up later in the book, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the discussion. And then we ended up with Anesia as our second villain. That was the person who trained with Sonya and helped her learn how to sword fight, and that those were the only two that lived. And she ends up as part of this invading army that's coming to try and conquer Dimas kingdom.
Mhm.
It's believed since they have the plague, they've raised this army to isolate the plague and kill all the people that have it in an attempt to contain it. So she's coming to basically kill everyone in the kingdom. This is, Sonya's good friend who actually loved her in all senses of that word. It was kind of hinted at. And so it turns out that she has gone basically insane with grief, with guilt. She
Mhm.
is They killed so many people together, even though they were basically given no choice, that she feels the haunting of all the people that they killed. The ghosts follow her, and she feels it's her job to make sure that the dead get company. So she's killing as many people as she can to give them company. It's what a great motivation for a villain. I mean,
Yeah.
Basrat is just a cartoon. We said that already, and I agree.
Mhm.
But Anesia has an interesting motivation. This is former best friend, former one of the people that was closest in the world to Sonya, the person who actually taught her how to use a sword.
Mhm.
And she has gone mad basically with guilt. And how does Sonya deal with that? She stands up to the challenge, but it gave Anesia a little bit of pathos that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise if she had just been if she had been another Basrat who would have cared. But this was somebody that you're like, oh, sister against sister. You felt like that whole kind of vibe coming from her.
Yeah.
What do you think of Anesia?
I think she's got some issues. I mean, I think you see her in the dungeon, and that was something that I'd written down where, well, for Sonya, that where she's kind of she's always saying like I have a name, but Anesia, she wants to like almost like take her under her wing, like you said,
Yeah,
she's teaching her how to fight with the sword and how to do this, and they were dear friends, like sisters, I think is like what they said at one point, and then suddenly to feel like I don't know, at some point maybe she was betrayed by her. I think Sonya felt a huge, well, like you said, she felt a huge loyalty to that king, and she didn't
right.
feel that way. And so perhaps at some point she felt betrayed by her, and now
Well,
she has this quest to do that, and
right. Well,
to kill everybody. And her demons are literally
yeah,
and figuratively coming to a head where she
yeah.
feels that guilt, but then
Well,
they're also there with her.
she has it in for Sonya because
Mm-hmm.
she feels Sonya's being disloyal to the dead. She's trying to
Yeah.
help the dead out, and she, in her mind, this is all real. So why isn't Sonya doing the same thing? And in her mind, that's the ultimate betrayal. Sonya is not
Mm-hmm.
trying to atone for her sins the way that Anesia thinks she is. So that to her means that Sonya has become a bad person. Basically, it
Mm-hmm.
is very twisted and crazy logic, but there is a logic there, and she basically lays it out. She says, why aren't you doing this too? Don't you hear them? She's telling,
Mm-hmm.
and so Anesia has a motivation. It's not one that makes full logical sense to a sane person, but I can completely follow it for her. And so she does have some fairly decent motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last villain, and hopefully you've read the book, because otherwise we're going to give away some stuff here, uh, is Prince Tiath, who's Dimath's son,
Mm-hmm.
who is, you meet him fairly early in the book, and he is a disappointment to the king. That's basically what we are told over and over again. The king has won a battle. Oh, it was when he was freeing Sonya, and asked where his son was and how did he quit himself in battle. He said, well, he didn't fight, but he's desecrating the bodies afterwards. That's what his one of his generals is telling the king. Tiath is a man of science, although Sonya considers him a sorcerer and refers to him as, but because Sonya, science and sorcery might as well be the same thing. But and he has been studying the human body and how people die and things like that, but is completely useless at swordplay and all the things that the king views as important. And so that sets up his motivation. We're talking about interesting motivations here. Tiath is just desperate to prove his worth, that he has value too, and that leads him to some very bad paths by the end of it. And I, as much as I felt sympathy for Anesia, I just couldn't muster any for Tiath by the end of this thing. So it turns out that this plague that has been decimating Dymath's people was actually a poison that Tiath had created. He created this poison. He poisoned the army and killed them all. He was told by King Basrat, who's still kicking around, we find out way late in the book, that this was a way that he could spare his people. If he agreed to kill the army and surrender, then they would spare his people and spare the king's life. That was the arrangement he did. So in his twisted mind, he thought he was doing the right thing. This was a way he was going to save his father's life, save the people of his kingdom. But Anesia wasn't having any of that Dymath living stuff, so that went awry. And then they ended up penned into the town, and Anesia's patrolling the outside. They couldn't get food, so they were all slowly starving to death. So his master plan there didn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end of the book, kind of the whole plot is coming undone, and Sonya and Anesia are getting down for one last showdown, where it all began in the gladiator arena. And then that's when Basrat reveals that he's alive, and he's watching these two fight, and he just has that Bond villain moment where he can't oh, that's an awesome shot, where he can't let it go, and he has to explain what he's done, which I think was a horrible mistake for multiple reasons. Anesia was completely focused on killing Sonya at that point, but then she realized that she was lied to. She thought she was doing the right thing by killing people who had the plague. She was convinced of that. And then when she finds out that the plague wasn't real, that it was just a poison, nobody could catch it, and that Basrat had ordered it himself, she realized she had burned whole villages full of innocent people in order to combat a plague that didn't exist. And it looks like she's about ready to kill Sonya here, but she's actually not. She manages to slip some coded messages to Sonya in the context of the book, and she helps Sonya, or Sonya helps her flip up and get close enough to Basrat that she manages to kill his guards, and then the whole plot starts coming apart. So so we get this redemptive arc for Anesia at the end, and you think that things might get a little better for her, that we might have gotten her on a better path. You're wondering if she can back off from this, edge of madness that she was on, because things were even worse. Once she realized that she had killed all these other people that didn't deserve to die on top of it, things were actually worse than they were before, because she suddenly saw all their ghosts as well, all of them haunting her for the things she had done. But she seemed to have the clarity to know who the real bad people were.
Right.
So anyway, so why don't you can you recap briefly for us what happens right at the end of the book between Anesia and Tiath?
Well, she doesn't like it. But it was great. He just feels this, and like you said, he's trying to show something to his father. He thinks that he's such a failure to his dad because he's not this strong person.
Right.
He realizes that, this is the only way to do it, and so that's what he does. And we see this come to an end where we've got the king ends up. Am I allowed to say this? Can I say this? Where he gets poisoned. They stop anyone from killing him because he's just going to die this slow, painful death. Everybody else, they let that happen. And we see Tiath then, we think maybe Anesia and Red Sonya are going to have this amicable ending where they're happy. And then we see Tiath kill Anesia. And of course he's like, oh, I killed her. I killed the woman who killed the king. I avenged her death. And obviously Sonya's like, you jerk. This is my friend. You're the one that caused all this. So now you're going to die.
Yeah.
This is this great scene as I'm going through the comic right now. And she just sees, he starts to plead for his life. Like, no, I can do something that's going to help everybody. I can save humankind. And
I can defeat death. He said he can conquer death.
And then she gets him right. That's me. Sorry. Her with her in his throat, getting ready to, threaten him. And then, she's just not going to have it.
Yeah.
And
she actually checks with him to say, so you can defeat death. And he says, yes, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes, the price is too high. And she cuts his head off.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to step on your words, but it reminds me of that scene. As soon as I read that, it reminded me of the scene in the movie Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, where you have the king there, and he said, "No man can ever defeat me." And she takes her helmet off and says, "I'm no man," and then just slices his head off. So it had that like great like sense of like that general just that strength, and that I'm not putting up with this because this is absolutely ridiculous, and he just can't. So again, that Diana, it was just fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah. So Diana brought up that the prince was a fantastic plant, since we're kind of conditioned to be sympathetic to science. We knew what he was doing, and that we know that's, I guess we're kind of conditioned to think that's the future of the world. So he is moving in the right direction, and maybe he was kind of tortured into being this because his father didn't see value in it and things. But yeah, it's just like I said, I couldn't bring up any sympathy. I was perfectly happy to see his head go flying. It would have been very unsatisfying to have him make it out of there alive after all the bad things he did. And then again, he was so proud of himself for having raised a sword in combat and everything. He stabbed her in the back. She was just standing there. He didn't.
There's no bravery.
No bravery.
Yeah.
And the look on his face when he's doing it, you're just going, yeah, that's a bad guy. He's just he's
like, I got it. Like a little kid almost. No, I thought that whole bit of it was just fantastic, where or I think and that was the other thing I was thinking about when I was reading it, where with women, we're so often, even like these superheroes, like they have this women have this emotional side to them. We're like, well, if you're not going to do it again, and they very easily could have said, if you're not going to do this again, okay, like we'll let you live, like we're going to show you some mercy. And Red Sonja's like, no, there's no mercy here.
Wonder Woman would have tried to let him live. Wonder Woman would have tried to, if he had Wonder Woman there, he might still be alive. But unfortunately, he drew the Red Sonja card. That's not going to pass. There's just so many little badass moments. I love her habitual drunkenness during the book. The book opens up with her hammered, sleeping it off at a fire, and some bandits are going to steal her stuff. And she tells them that they need to leave or she'll kill them. Said, "Oh, if you were going to kill us, you would have done it by now." I said, "Yeah, but I'm drunk and I don't want to get blood on my horse." So that's which.
Well, then they're going to get her, and then she's like, "Well, I'm not that drunk." And then,
that drunk.
But even so, like in her slightly inebriated stage, she still manages to like get rid of everybody. Yeah, fantastic.
They didn't even put up a challenge. I mean, that was nothing to her. She 3 to 1 odds was not good for her. I wanted to bring up some of the what are the strengths of the book that I think really goes is not just in how Sonya is characterized, and we've already talked about the main villains. Everybody was characterized very well. They did such a good job of establishing, the protagonists, side characters, villains. All those people had these interesting motivations and understandable motivations. And even some of these smaller side characters. One of my favorites were Ayla and Nias, the twins that were her bodyguards.
Like almost the comic relief throughout the whole book.
They're pretty much, they worship Sonya, and they constantly referring to her as your radiance and your majesty and things like that in deference to her. And they start out completely inept. They said they've killed hundreds, and then it turns out hundreds of rabbits. That's all they've managed to do. And in this very scene, they're trying to rescue Sonya, who does not need their help in any way, shape, or form. And they end up getting captured because they can't basically let the arrow fly. They're unwilling to, shoot and kill the bandits. So they end up getting held hostage briefly before Sonya takes care of that problem too. They are her kind of handmaidens through this entire thing. The king sent them to go get her. But one of the interesting things we see is by following Sonya, she tells them that they'll never be soldiers right at the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of the book, She is they are the generals leading the army as Sonya fights Anesia. They rounded up all the other remaining people, armed them, and are leading them to rout the invading army and to come provide backup to them. And you completely buy it. You've seen them step by step as they've learned from Sonya along the way. That they became a different people. So they had a complete character arc for these two minor side characters that could have been nothing but comic relief, but they actually, we saw them develop, and Sonya is the one who decides that they are the new regents of the kingdom, because the king's dead, the prince is dead, and Sonya's certainly not going to take that job. That is not something that interests her. So they had not even thought of themselves, but she, as the regent, a parent, I guess, decides that they're going to be the new leaders of their kingdom. And you feel pretty good about that decision. You say these two are now so different than they were at the beginning of the book that they'll do a good job.
Oh, absolutely. She, well, and even at the beginning of the book, when they're the picture that you have up at that first campground, where they're such a nuisance to her, they're such a bother to her. Later on, where she's traipsing through the snow and that white stag comes to visit her, and they find her again, and they think, again, she's very slowly throughout the book, kind of gradually grows an affection for them, and then, at the end, she's giving them, like you said, she gave them that appointment, and then giving them hugs and just showing that affection. It was a very nice, just again, that like wonderful, that great female relationship kind of progressing all the way through, and with support.
Yeah, and Diana's bringing up that Sonya also had only killed rabbits before she took vengeance for her village. That's the second part of her origin story. So we'll get back to that. But yeah, that's a good point. They were much like Sonya was at the beginning of her thing. Sonya also could not kill the stag. Even she could not, beyond killing a person, Sonya couldn't kill a deer because it was too beautiful, even though it would have fed her village. And Sonya, through a series of unfortunate events, became the kind of person that could kill fairly easily. I did want to bring up, they're constantly coming up with different names of worship for Sonya during it, and they're hilarious. They're great. So I have my favorite. It's right at the top. They say, "We're not couriers, oh she of the excellent cleavage," which was just awesome. So yeah, they bring Sonya back, and we were talking about the chainmail bikini, and I think, again, one of the ways they established that this was warranted and part of Sonya's personality is when they try to dress Sonya up to make her presentable for court. And they're talking about how pretty and lovely she looks, and she goes, "It itches." That's her comment. Sonya does not like this. She doesn't like having her hair done. She does not like putting clothes on. She just does not care for this in any way, shape, or form. And her annoyance at this. And if we can... What's funny is you see this dress right here that she's wearing. Can we go to the next page? And if you see in the bottom left corner there, Sonya converted it into a bikini. If you see, she's got a bare midriff down. She ripped it up a little bit because she just couldn't handle, being covered that much. So I didn't even notice that until I was going through taking notes for studying it a little bit. I said, "Hey, what happened to the dress?" If you look in the top, you can see it even better. She's got a bare midriff, so she went from having a full dress. And the way I interpreted that was that Sonya had decided that was too much coverage. So it itched. She didn't like it, so she was going to have as little of it as possible.
I don't know. It sounds like my kids. Like, oh, it itches. Well, and it was interesting because when they were, pardon me, with the first dressing her up, it very much had that Greek goddess sort of a thing where she's just like this lovely creature that we need to, put on a pedestal and honor because she's so great. And she's like, enough of this. What can I do to help? And she's just because she has that loyalty to the king. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and again, it just comes across. It could have come across as exploitative and as excuse making for the eye candy type thing. But again, I just bought into it in a way that I had never bought into it with this character before. I said, no, that's exactly right. That's how Sonya wants to. You don't mess with Sonya. That's how she wants to dress. She's going to dress that way. So some of the other minor characters I thought were pretty cool were was the wife of the general. We mentioned her briefly at the end. The evil king, Basrat, what's his name? Basrat. the evil King Basrat at the end was watching Sonya and Anesia fight to the death, which was, he said he was denied them fighting to the death the last time because they were freed when they were destined to fight each other the next day. And it turns out he has like concubines around him, and one of them was the wife of one of his generals, and he liked her, so he killed his own general so that he could take her basically as a love slave, and her only duty was to keep his wine cup filled. So at the very end, after Sonya, Anesia, and the twins have conquered the army and have the king at sword point, and Sonya's going to kill him, she says, "Don't kill him." And Sonya's mad at her because she's like, "How could you let yourself be turned into this?" And then she says, "I've filled his goblet with nothing but poison. He's going to be gone in just a few minutes anyways." And so we see that even when they don't have the kind of traditional like sword fighting strength that like Anesia or Sonya has, the women in the book are portrayed as having some agency and not putting up with this crap. You know, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I loved it. I think that's, again, someone that could be very meek in this whole situation, a damsel in distress, and she takes it into her own hands and she does away with this terrible evil human being. So, but it was great. And then how she just kind of walks away after the end of that too, which that was just great. And seeing him there, like, so now I'm getting sort of a dark side here where you're seeing him like suffer, and you think of what he put her through, and again, yeah, I love it. It was great.
So I think we got to talk about the other instigating event that created Red Sonya as we know her today, because she grew up, and again, she was this, I think we could say she was probably about 11 or 12, somewhere in there. I'm trying to peg how old she was. She was, right on the edge of pubescence, right in the middle school ages. And she was hunting with her family, and she couldn't, kill a deer, and her father kind of berated her because we need that to eat. And then while she is out hunting again, trying to bring in food, her village is attacked. And you want to recap what happened there? And
yeah, it's great. So we have some barbarians coming through, which again, sure happen all the time there. We have this the barbarians coming through. And as they're, Sonya and her family are hunting, they say, "You stay here. You're not ready to fight. You need to stay here." So they rush off. And of course, Sonya ends up following, and she sees what's going on with her village, where everyone is, people are being killed. The village is being burned. And we see her eventually see the barbarians come through, and they slaughter her entire family.
Right.
And for her, as she's sitting there watching that, we have some guy come up behind her, another barbarian, and saying like, "All right, you just watch here, and I'm going to teach you a thing or two."
There's a rape threat there.
Intending to rape her. Yeah. They obviously she didn't get that far, but she manages to kill him.
Yeah.
Which again, in her kind of fight or flight situation, she fights, and then she gets the heck out of there. But immediately, if I'm able to just keep going further, gets her revenge on these barbarians. She sees them in the woods, and these are the woods that she's, like you said, she's probably about 11 or 12 years old. I can only imagine that she's been going out with her father, this close family, for a really long time. She knows these woods. She's very familiar with them.
Right.
She can, her eyes have adjusted to the darkness. And when the leader of the barbarian group goes out, she taunts him a little bit and then kills him, which is, again, fantastic.
She hunted and killed all of them. The invading army that was big enough to kill everyone in her village, armed men. Sonya kills all of them as an 11 or 12-year-old girl. And the way she does it is with that bow, because she hasn't been taught how to use the sword yet. But the bow that she couldn't use against a deer, she's using against grown men. And she realizes they don't have any ranged weapons. So she stays in the trees, hopping from tree to tree in this forest. They can never get up there where she's at. And she just picks them off one at a time and kills everyone. It's an amazing vengeance story that this little, girl turns into this instrument of vengeance. And she did it at the behest of her father, who she really looked up to and admired. When he was being killed, he put the curse of and I'll mispronounce her, Hycurian people on the bandit leader. And you started to feel that Sonya was the personification of this curse that he had put on the bandit, that she was somehow his vengeance made real, and I wouldn't want to tick Sonya off at the age of 11. She is a scary, scary girl.
Well, we get the sense of too of where she couldn't kill that stag.
Right.
And maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe it was an innocent thing that she couldn't do, but these people were not innocent. And so again, with the, seeing that tragedy that just happened to her, she had no problem killing off those that absolutely were not innocent. But that whole, again, we talk about these origin stories, and for her to have seen that, I can only imagine that instilled in her just another sense of just right and wrong and serving vengeance where vengeance is due.
Right. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the original origin stories of Sonya, because the contrast is so great. There was a implication of rape there that did not happen because Sonya killed the guy. In the previous version that Dynamite had done, Sonya was raped during that, and that's where the whole "no man will ever sleep with me unless you fight with a sword" or something. It was using rape as a cheap plot device. It was really not good. It didn't feel wholesome and clean. And then also she was that whole kind of curse thing. She was blessed by a goddess with unbeatable sword fighting skills. She didn't earn them. She was this whole, she prayed to the goddess for, the ability to conduct vengeance. And so she was divinely granted these sword fighting abilities, which is great, except that she didn't earn them. And we see a story here where Sonya learns how to fight with a sword because Sonya learns how to fight with a sword. It's something she earns and works at and gets better at, rather than she was just magically granted these abilities by a goddess. And I think what a stronger decision and a stronger choice.
Absolutely.
And then Diana Lee's, we have it up on the screen, pointing out that the stag that she was a white stag that she wouldn't hunt in her father's forest. And it's the same one that she refuses to kill when she is dying of what she at the time believes is the plague up in the mountains, slowly freezing to death. She sees it, and then she decides, in her last moments, I'm not going to kill this. I'm dead anyways. What difference does it make? I'm not going to take this magnificent creature with me. And then there's a great moment where she is, when she's a kid, she buries everyone in the village before hunting down the barbarians by hand. She digs graves for everyone. And then we get a call back to that when she's dying up in the mountains. She's digging her own grave so that she'll be buried. And that's when the twins find her and manage to rescue her.
Yeah.
We got a call back to the stag, and that was right during the flashback too. So they put them very close together because she was hallucinating because of the poison, as we found out, and she flashed back to her childhood. And so maybe the stag wasn't even really there. It's kind of hard to say. She was pretty out of it at that point. I liked her Klingon honor. I liked that coming across. The Klingons are the ones that I always think have that. You know what I mean? The whole, that she has an ethos that's very, very straightforward. You keep your word, you keep your vows of vengeance, you keep, everything. If you treat her honorably, she'll treat you honorably. She likes getting drunk. She likes fighting. She's just such a fun character. I don't know if there's a great analog for her in other pop culture. I don't know if there's another Sonya type out there. There should be somewhere, but I'm not thinking of her right now.
Right now, Jessica Jones comes to mind.
In
a sense where, especially since she, she's also deeply flawed. And I think that's another thing too, where she has flaws, she has demons from her past, but also is, again, a total boss where she can, where she goes after those that have done wrong. And so that's the one that I most closely identified with her with Red Sonya. But it's great. Yeah, it's kind of a very interesting character.
And they both like getting drunk, so I think that's
there you go.
Who doesn't? But there's a good common thread. Jessica Jones is a good one. Although Jessica Jones does have the kind of traumatic rape incident in her background that Sonya does not. So there is that portion of it. But I think otherwise they're very similar type of that whole kind of snarly, gruff outside and hard drinking and itching for a fight, kind of enjoying it when they get in a fight. I think that those there's some similarities there. So let's talk a little bit about just the art, because we haven't mentioned Mr. Walter Giovanni, who this is what I know him from. I'm sure he's done other things that are good because he's too good for him not to have, but I don't really know him from other stuff. And it is, we're talking about how Sonya was handled by a female creator well. how do we feel like Sonya was treated by the male artist? Did we like the art in the book?
I liked it a lot. It was it was really cool. And again, like I said at the start, I appreciated just her, just her physical body, the way that they did her. It was just, she just looked like a strong woman. It wasn't this overtly sexual person. It was just and because again, her story was so great that you really focus on what she was doing versus actually like what she was wearing. But overall, I'm sitting here going through the book, kind of as we're talking here, and how it's a little bit dark. I mean, I don't want to quite say like film noir, but I think that's probably the closest thing I can use to describe to it right now, because it is a dark story. It is. She has a dark history, but it was really great. And then just that, shock of red hair that she has, of course, I think is just it's so great. And the emotion that's conveyed in faces too, I thought was really excellent.
Yeah, I think you did a good job. Tough line to walk there when you're asked to draw women in a chainmail bikini through the entire book and not make it exploitative in any way. And I think he did about as good a job as any human being on the planet could do with that. And one other thing I was just thinking about with the chainmail bikini that I'd written down earlier was that she isn't wedded to it. When she's cold, she puts on more clothes, and when she's going into her big battle with Anesia, she wears head to toe chainmail. She's not an idiot about it. I mean, it's what she prefers to wear, and as a barbarian, I think she's most comfortable in it. But when the situation calls for it, she's perfectly willing to wear other things. She doesn't have to be in the chainmail bikini all the time. There she is. When she's up in the frozen mountains, she doesn't feel the need to walk around in a metal bikini, which would cause all sorts of problems, I would imagine.
Frostbite, man. I mean, it's just not good.
On sensitive bits. Diana Lee is bringing up that they did a good job of not posing her more a lot of the time. That's a big trend with again, I'm going to probably go back to the 90s. Jim Lee did this run on the X-Men, and it was super popular among, let's just say, 12 to 21-year-old men. And they would draw these amazing, as a piece of art, they were very impressive, big splash pages with all the heroes, but the women were always very posed. They'd be standing sideways so you could see their butt, and then twisted the torso a little bit so you could see the chest too. And every picture of them looked like a pinup. It was about that time that I started realizing the flaws in that kind of art, even as a guy and everything. I went, the storytelling component of art, telling a story flowing from picture to picture. His drawings looked so artificially posed that it was hard to believe that they were real, that things were really happening. They looked like a photo shoot for a magazine or something like that. They didn't look like these things were actually happening. And so this is a big trend with exploitative work, posing the women in weird positions just so you can get a butt shot or, look down her cleavage or something like that. They're constantly doing that. And they didn't here, which I think was nice.
Yeah, well, she's a warrior. She's not a Vargas girl. So I appreciate that, in even her, her stance while she's the picture I'm looking at right now is where she's in the pit, and just even her stance, there's never she's hunched over ready to fight. She's not standing up straight or anything. So again, like her posture in that was really cool. But you really felt like she was fierce and that she was ready to fight.
So they brought up the female artist who did the alternate covers in the back. I don't know if you flipped all the way to the back of the book.
Some of them were really cute.
It was these are probably the most cheesecakey of anything in the book. These are some of the best and most well-known female artists in the comic industry, and they rounded up a whole bunch of them, and they got them each to do alternate covers for the book. And it's interesting seeing the range of how women like to portray women, because there are some that go for the cheesecake. Amanda Connor, who is in here, she is absolutely known for that. She draws Harley Quinn and Power Girl probably is their biggest one. Power Girl is known for having a massively large chest, and Amanda Connor, she did not shy away from that. She loved that. There's some great people. The Fiona Staples on the next spread, who's a artist from Saga, who draws a much more kind of grounded looking one. Colleen Duran, who did whatchamacallit, well, she did The Sandman back in the day, and she also did A Distant Soil, which is her independent book. If you want to support a female creator that's doing magnificent work, Colleen Duran's Distant Soil, she's been self-publishing it for like 20-something years now. It's this big, epic fantasy story. So you heard it from me. Go support female artists and creators that have been in this industry a long time. And then, yeah, so they did, and then there's like a more fun cartoony ones even, and
yeah, Stephanie Buscema, if I'm saying that correctly. Yes. Honestly, it looks like if Disney did did Red Sonja. But that particular style of illustration, I love it. And so that one I was especially drawn to because it's just I don't know. I mean, the kind of the angles of it and whatever, but yeah, I loved it. But it was really cool to see just the different interpretations of it, and I loved it. It's so awesome.
Yeah, and then there's Ming Doyle did a fairly kind of, I think, the most reality-based version of it. And I love the Becky Cloonan where she's just drenched in blood sitting down there. And boy, that sounds odd to say out loud, but
yeah. Very, very.
David Strum is pointing out that he loved Amanda Connor's run on Power Girl. Was for facial expressions, and she knows it's all in the face. I will agree. It's always dangerous territory for guys to wander into because Amanda Connor's just known for drawing pretty girls in sexy poses and stuff. And to be fair, Gail Simone's kind of known for writing that kind of character. She likes. She wrote Birds of Prey for a long time, and she loved playing up the sexuality of people like Black Canary and stuff like that. They wore fishnets because they much the same reason. Fishnets on Black Canary were this holdover from her being a pinup girl in World War II. And Gail Simone made me believe that this is a choice that she made in the modern day because it made her feel like a badass, and I bought into it 100%. Not everybody does that, but Gail always manages to sell me on the idea that is just how these women choose to be, and makes me feel okay about reading a book that features a woman maybe in skimpier outfits than you would normally think are appropriate. It takes reading the book to get to that point, but she manages to make you feel okay about it and justifies it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%.
And Diana is bringing up that because you're female doesn't mean you haven't internalized the need to objectify women's bodies. It's completely true. Everybody has biases, but she's as in control of her own as anybody else's, and who's to say what's her own predilections and what's something that society has conditioned her to. I don't think there's any way to unbake that cake and figure out what the ingredients are, but for whatever reason, people like Gail and Amanda like that. And you see it a lot at cons too. There are cosplayers who really enjoy dressing up and they feel empowered by portraying the sexier female characters. Not all cosplayers, but there is a chunk of them that do. And I as long as there are enough of the other kind of heroes so that you have this variety, and there are things on the other end of the spectrum where you have, Ripley from Aliens or, something like that, where you have heroes or Miss Marvel, who's, very modestly dressed. And if they draw her chesty, that means they don't really understand what 15-year-old girls look like, and so they generally don't. They've done a very good job of remembering she's 15 most of the time. And so, as long as we have characters out there like that too, I'm okay with this, dalliance and like good girl art or whatever you call it, as long as it's not everything. Not every female character should be portrayed like Red Sonja. That it's she's a one-off, and I'm okay with that. But we need to make sure that the bulk of heroes are over on a different end of the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and Diana's saying she supports the women making decisions to wear the skimpiest clothes they choose to wear. So I get that, and the problem is that you have male writers and artists deciding that this is what the female character wanted to see, wants to wear most of the time, and so it starts to feel a little self-serving, and especially sometimes how they're posed and the positions they write them to get into and stuff. You feel a little skeevy. So I get what you're saying about it. If it's the woman's choice, but when the woman's a fictional character and she's being written and drawn by a man, because I had this argument about Starfire, who's one of the Teen Titans, and she's adorable in Teen Titans Go, and in the comics a little bit ago when they rebooted the comic books. She was wearing some dental floss and was evidently attempting to smuggle cantaloupes into the country. And it was just off-putting to the extreme to me. And I brought that up in a comic book forum, and a guy said, "Oh, but that's just what her people are like. That's the culture of her people." I'm like, yeah, but a dude made that up. I mean, there's no. Sure. They accused me of slut shaming the fictional alien princess, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, I can't. Can't go there with you. So, any other thoughts on Sonya? Are there other things we need to cover?
I think we went through it. I mean, the biggest thing was talking about that dang bikini, but I'll tell you what, I think it was good. But again, like you said, we've already hit the point home that with Gail Simone, having Red Sonya in her hands, she really did an excellent job of portraying her as the warrior that she is. And then, and it's not in every single comic book or every single graphic novel, but that there was no romantic innuendo or situation with Red Sonya. It was just strictly her being the fighter,
right.
and going to her loyalty to this king. There was no, again, there was no sexual tension between the two. It was these friendships, and that was also really nice to see. I think in other volumes or other variations of this, that's part of it. But for this first one, it was cool to see just this driven, female-driven story where she's just this really strong woman.
Yeah. I will say that you said there's no romantic interest, but there was one. It is beyond implied that Anesia is in love with Sonya. When she asked at the end, when they're down to the last two, they're going to put them in to fight each other to the death. They're the only two women or people left. They've killed all the men. And Anesia said that she won't raise her arm up, her sword up to her. And Sonya says, "Why? You'll die." And she says, "You know why?" That's basically the and then we get a payoff for that. It's actually in reverse order, though. I think we see this first before we see the flashback trying to remember the order of events. So there is this one
first, and then the flashback where we see them
in the sleep. Yeah. So this is a payoff to that scene. It looks like we're pretty clear that Anesia is also in control of her own sexuality. And that there was more going on there than that. Beyond loving Red Sonya, she loved Red Sonya. And so interesting to, I don't think because of the situation, there was no chance to actually figure out what Sonya's reaction to that would be, because it was such, Anesia was so far gone and they're in the middle of a war and there's a plague going on. I don't think we got any clear hint of what Sonya thought of that. But she was, so there was a small bit of, I hesitate to use the word romance. She was trying to kill her right then, but there was a hint of romantic feeling. But throughout the entire thing, Sonya does not have any romantic inclination to any of the men that she encounters, which, to be fair, were fairly few. It was the king and bad guys. I mean, I don't think we saw too many heroic men in this book at all.
Just the king.
Yeah, it's just the king. I mean, well, all the soldiers had died. I mean, they poisoned the army, so that was presumably all men. And so we lost the menfolk early in this one. And we got a comment from Melissa. I love Gail Simone. She's been one of my favorites for a long time. Her characters are always well fleshed out, and though sexy, they're generally making those choices themselves and not just portrayed as fluffy eye candy. I 100% agree. I always hesitate to bring this up when we're talking about this, like on the web forums and stuff, because when you're a guy saying, no, she needs to wear next to nothing, it just doesn't come across well. She's choosing to do that. It sounds more self-serving than it is. I enjoy how Gail Simone portrays these characters. Because Red Sonya is the perfect example. She's wearing about the same thing that she's always worn. It was a huge turnoff to me all the way up until Gail Simone did. It just made me feel dirty because it was just so obvious that the character was not well written enough to justify any decision making this. She's just in that because they wanted to put her in a bikini for guys to look at. That was it. And Gail Simone always manages to backtrack out of that, figure out what would motivate the character, and make you feel like these are choices the characters making, that the character is empowered by this rather than demeaned by it or objectified by it. And it's pretty good. Strom is asking for Gail Simone recommendations. Okay, well, we brought up Birds of Prey. Her run on Birds of Prey is legendary. It really is the run that led to the creation of the movie. She is the best person on Birds of Prey. I like, what else? Secret Six by Gail Simone. Also very good. It's a bad guys book. You're following 6 villains, and she gets you to, much like she gets you to feel okay about the women in skimpy clothes, she gets you to root for the villains. They're not doing good things. This isn't even like anti-hero territory. These are villains doing villainous stuff, and you start to feel bad for them. I mean, they're the people that always lose because they're, super villains in a superhero world. So but she manages to give them believable motivations for doing what they do, and makes you feel good about, or makes you feel sympathetic towards these villains that you should not feel sympathetic for at all. She had Bane in there for a while. Bane, the guy that broke Batman's back and everything. Mm-hmm. And you start going, I kind of like Bane. You start thinking that kind of thing halfway through the book. Melissa Kelly's bringing up Clean Room. Oh, that's an excellent indie book that Gail did. Mm-hmm. What was the other one? go ahead.
I was going to say Deadpool and and I know she did with Wonder Woman as well, right?
Yeah.
Although that's not one that's unknown.
Great,
but
great run on Wonder Woman, and she's the one that I think gave Deadpool his voice. Deadpool was a crappy creation by crappy creator Rob Liefeld. I'm sorry, Rob. if you're listening or watching, he was just a generic. Rob liked drawing pouches on people and liked them having swords and guns, and he brought those into the superhero world where I was always like, that's kind of not the fun of the whole thing. You want people that can, shoot lasers out of their eyes and that don't have to kill people. I didn't like the militarization of superheroes, but Gail got a hold of Deadpool and made him the merc with the mouth. She made him funny. Oh God, he was funny. And again, it shows you the resurrection or the difference that a creator behind the scenes can make. When one person's writing it, I don't like it so much. And then when another person's writing it, did. All right. I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. I've gotten the signal from producer Patty there. And Welcome to Tranquility is another independent book she did. That's great. And her run on Wonder Woman was absolutely fantastic. She and Greg Rucka are probably my 2 favorite Wonder Woman writers of all time. Anything by them. And Melissa's saying that Life Ill is bad. She used a lot of A's for emphasis. And I agree. Rob seems like a nice enough guy, but he was an artist that never went to art school. So he would draw, like, instead of 6-pack abs, his characters would have like 8 or 10-pack abs, because he wasn't quite sure how many abs people were supposed to have. And he would draw women with the most unbelievably unrealistic proportions. He got very popular in the 90s, and then that style went out of favor and he couldn't really adapt. He got so big though that they were letting him create his own superheroes. What my favorite was, he created a mutant called Four Arms, and he had 4 arms. That was it. That was the entire.
There's somewhere, right?
His name's Forearm, and he has 4 arms. And good thinking, Rob. So he can't poke fun at himself, though. He recently created a character called the Pouch, because everyone laughed about how he always put pouches all over his characters, and so he made a character made out of nothing but pouches. So, and that's the most I can say for Rob Liefeld. He's able to make fun of himself. All right. I have not given any thought at all to what we're going to read next month. If people have something they are dying to read, let me know. I have a ton of stuff on the shelves behind me. I can certainly find something. I finally forced Queen of Plagues because I've been asking for people to vote on this since the beginning. And since you people wouldn't vote correctly, you forced my hand and made me make you read this. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate everyone stopping by, listening, and chatting with us. And we will see you in 1 month. And thank you, Sarah, for joining me. And I wanted to show off one thing. Here. Mm-hmm. There we go. Yay!
You can buy merch now.
You can buy merch now, and you should. We got some pretty slick looking merchandise. I got another shirt coming in a little bit with the full color logo too. So I'm very happy with this. We also have a bumper sticker for the back of the car. So we're all heroic girls kitted out when we drive around town.
I love it.
And
I'm excited for my shirt to come. I'm very excited.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you in 1 month. Oh, and there is a book club group now that is associated with the page. Before we had the ability to create groups associated with the page, I created a Heroic Girls Book Club page. There's no way to convert that into a group, so I'm going to have to abandon it, and we're going to make a group. So, Rat Queens is a good suggestion. We're going right for the sex and violence again. I see where you guys like your bread butters. Rat Queens makes Red Sonya look like an after-school special. That is just filthy in every way imaginable. All right, guys. Maybe though, Rat Queens is great. I do love the book. Okay, thank you, everybody, and we will see you next month.